Learning a language can be an absolutely beautiful thing. You get to learn about the culture and the history, and you get to make connections with incredible people. The Japanese language is no exception. So today, I want to teach you about the history of the word fart in Japanese. Welcome to Japan Station, where we come to talk about Japan. My name is Tony Vega. I'm a legally blind content creator. Been running JapanKyo.com since 2016, putting out articles, podcasts, and videos all about Japan and the Japanese language. If you want to support, make sure to hit the subscribe button over on YouTube, like and comment. If you're listening over on the podcast side, subscribe, maybe drop me a review. I would greatly appreciate that. Patreon and Ko-fi, also incredibly helpful. Links down below. You can join for as little as $1 a month or do a one-time donation over on Ko-fi. But let's get to the point. So as I said, we're talking about farts. We're talking about the Japanese word for fart. We're going to go into the origins of this word. And the word that I'm talking about is onara.
それが onara.
So, as you may know, I came to Hawaii to get a master's degree in Japanese language and linguistics many years ago. I did that. I love the Japanese language and linguistics, and so I love to dig into these little quirks of languages, especially the Japanese language. So that's why we're getting into the etymology, the origins of this word. And it's actually pretty interesting. I didn't fully understand all the origins. I don't think I'd ever even looked into it, but it ties in with a very interesting, let's say, linguistic phenomenon that happened several hundred years ago that has shaped, very much so, it has deeply shaped the Japanese language even to this day. We still speak the language in a way that was influenced so long ago. So specifically, I'm referring to the Muromachi period. So that dates back to the first half of the 1300s to the second half of the 1500s. So quite a while ago. And back then, of course, there was the emperor and everybody in that sphere of the emperor. The imperial ladies, the ladies of the court and the ladies in that whole imperial sphere, they spoke a special language called Nyobo kotoba. Now, it was Japanese. It's just that they used some quirky versions of common words. So they would modify them so that these words were more euphemistic, a little bit more kind of roundabout, vague, and in a sense, polite. Vagueness and euphemisms can be considered a form of politeness. So this is where onara comes in. This is actually a euphemism. But before I get into the specifics of onara and how this word works, and I feel so strange saying this word again and again and again.
おならした。おならした。
おならって何？
おならした。
おならって何？
It's not a word I normally say. Most people don't say this 10 times in a day, right? It's a word that you rarely say. Let's just say. But anyway, yeah. So before I break that down, let me explain kind of some of the interesting quirks of Nyobo kotoba, which literally translates to something like women's words, again, because it was the women of the imperial court that were using this. It was kind of like a secret language, a coded language. This is how it's described in sometimes in English, sometimes in Japanese in this way. So, for example, I'll throw out two examples. Shamoji. So shamoji is the word for like a rice paddle, right? Like that rice scooper that you know, in the what's it called? The rice cooker, right? You get the scooper and you put it in the thing, and you get the rice scooper, you get your rice in the bowl, right? So shamoji is what it's called. But this is a word that dates back to this whole Nyobo kotoba Muromachi period, because apparently originally the word was shakushi, but then it got turned into shamoji. So one of the features of Nyobo kotoba is that the end of a word will get chopped off, and then moji gets put there instead as a suffix. So there's various words that have moji in it. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but just you can look it up. There's a list. But shamoji is one of the most common ones that everybody uses this word shamoji like on a daily basis, probably for some people at least. But this dates back to then. Originally it was shakushi. I've never heard shakushi in daily conversation. People just call it a shamoji, and this goes all the way back to that period. Now, here's another example. So just remember, chop off at the end, and that's going to come back in the case of onara. Now, another example of this is oden. So oden is a type of Japanese food, a cuisine or a dish, I guess you would say. Basically, it's like a bunch of stuff boiled in a pot. And yeah, you see it at the convenience store, especially in the winter. And so it's called oden. But apparently, originally, the word was dengaku. So again, we get the gaku chopped off in that second part of the word. Dengaku, chop off gaku, you get den. And then you add o to the beginning as a prefix, and you get oden. So this chopping off, again, we're going to see it in onara. And then the nara, you already get that o. So this o pops up in a lot of words in Japanese. If you know even minimal Japanese, you may have already thought of a few. But just here's one more example. And this does fall in the list of this Nyobo kotoba, this women's words, Muromachi period. Onigiri.
These donuts are great. Jelly-filled are my favorite. Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut.
Onigiri. Now, you probably know that word if you've listened to anything and learned a little bit of Japanese or, listened to anything like that in Japanese. You've heard this word probably. It means rice ball. Right? So onigiri. Now, this is also rather euphemistic. I didn't look into the history of this, but this is quite euphemistic in that it's a rice ball, but the word rice is not in that word, right? Like nigiru is the verb that this derives from. Nigiru is the verb. Nigiru means to like close your fist, to clench your fist in a sense. So that is alluding to the fact that you make a rice ball by closing your hands around it, by closing your fists around it and shaping it into that, the shape of your hand. So it is implying the rice ball by directly describing the action being taken to create the rice ball. Like, really interesting, right? You don't think about that when you're just going to the convenience store and saying like, I guess I'll just get tuna mayo onigiri. But that's the case. And then it has that o, that it has a polite sound to it, to the ear, right? To the Japanese speaker ear. So onigiri. Now let's go to onara. We're back to the fart. So onara. Now where does this come from? So we've got that o, right? Which is kind of that polite sounding thing. I hesitate to just call it outright polite, but it has that sound to it, right? And it has this association with women's language, with the polite feminine speech style, but you can't say that it's strictly feminine because men use it as well. So that gets into a whole other topic. But basically, yeah, in certain contexts, it can have a slightly feminine sound, but it really is a case-by-case basis. So don't worry about it if you're a manly man and you're worried about saying, don't worry about it. It's okay to say, something, whatever. So what about nara? So nara comes from, apparently, this is what I saw a few articles and they all mentioned this. So it comes from narasu or narashi. Basically same word, just noun and verb form. But narasu means to like make a sound, to ring, to crack something, like as in a sound, right? So that's the implication, right? You're making a sound with your butt. So narashi or narasu ends up getting shortened to onara. And we arrive at onara. And this word is the most common word for fart in Japanese, the noun fart. Now, you would say onara suru these days, right? That's how you would say like the action of farting. That's a verb. There is another way to say fart, and that's he. I couldn't find the origins of this specific word, but I suspect that it just comes from the sound of like air because it's like he. So I suspect that that's the origins of that. And with a verb, you can say he o koku. I'm not telling you to use these words, but there you go. You know what they mean now, and you can, at least with onara, you understand that it's actually a pretty interesting history, and there's a lot of these Nyobo kotoba that we still use today. So if you're curious about Nyobo kotoba and you would like me to cover other stuff, I'm very curious to see if people enjoy this kind of content. Leave me a comment. Tell me like, hey, that was really interesting. Teach us more about these Japanese quirky words and history and all this stuff and phrases. Actually, I did an entire series, like maybe like 10 episodes of stuff like this for my Patreon over at the $3 a month plus alpha tier. You can go over there and you can find those episodes. They're still there. They're audio only. I may start doing more stuff like that, but let me know. And if you want to support and let me know that you really do enjoy the content, again, Patreon and Ko-fi links down below in the description or in the show notes if you're listening to the audio only. All right, so don't onara in public. And subscribe and see you next time.